Hi everybody. This is a demonstration on how to design your repeat pattern for screen printing. So I'm going to go through all the steps here, and please take notes and pause and make sure you ask all the questions you need to at the end. So the first thing that I have is a piece of paper that's 12 inches by 12 inches. This is going to set you up for a really comfortable size pattern within your 20 inch by 22 inch frame screen print. So you'll take a piece of paper, cut it first to 12 inches by 12 inches. Second, you're going to come up with a composition that fits comfortably within the 4 frames and also follows all of the standard rules of design. So you want to make sure that you have scale changes, that you have good positive negative space, that you have your information is moving and your eye is flowing all around this composition, because if you start with a really strong composition, then your repeat pattern is only going to become stronger. But if you start with kind of a weak composition, then you can run into some sort of issues as you're printing, that the information isn't jumping out and popping at you and doing all of the wonderful magical things that a repeat pattern can do. So I've done a loose sketch here on my 12 inch by 12 inch paper, and first in pencil. It's a great idea to sketch in pencil first. And now I'm going to take a Sharpie and go over the marks that I've made because I'm happy with them and I want to see kind of more in a more permanent sense what my composition looks like. Okay, so now that I can see what my general pattern looks like, I can now begin to work with this image and make it ready to burn onto my screen. So a couple things that we need before we get started. We're gonna need a cutting table, like any cutting mat or surface will do, some kind of straight edge, a ruler. I have a quilting square, an X-Acto knife. I have a rotary cutter, but it's basically the same thing. I just don't have an X-Acto knife right here. A roll of tape, your pencil, and your Sharpie. Okay, so now that I have my 12 inch by 12 inch square, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to measure out 4 quadrants. So I'm going to do a very light pencil line at 6 inches down the center and at 6 inches down the center again. I'm then going to number my quadrants, always in pencil because I'm going to want to erase these marks by the end. So starting in the top left, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, once I have my quadrants numbered, I'm actually going to cut up my drawing into those 4 quadrants by following the lines that I've made. So here's where you're going to use your X-Acto knife, and I'm going to use my rotary cutter. Believe me when I tell you that the more precise you are for every single step, the easier that it's going to be when it comes to actually printing your pattern. And it will become very clear why I'm doing this in just a second. Okay, my pattern is cut up, my drawing is cut up into my 4 quadrants, and now I'm going to rearrange them. So here's how the drawing started, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. The next thing that I'm going to do is flip 1 and 2 with 3 and 4. So now I have 3 and 4 at the top and 1 and 2 at the bottom. All right, the reason that I'm doing this is because you can imagine we want our pattern to interlock. So when you print all of your screens across the entire large surface, so paper, fabric, whatever it is, You want the pattern to look seamless. Imagine wallpaper, so that there's no start or stop for each of these individual modules. So what this is doing by cutting up the paper into quadrant is it's showing you where there are holes basically in your design. So when it starts to interlock, oh, this is going to be very obvious that there's kind of like a big empty space in your design. So it's very clear that to me right now that I have a gigantic space in between quadrant 4 and 2 right now. So I'm going to go ahead and draw another flower. Another thing that I forgot to mention in the beginning is that it is so important in your original drawing that none of your drawing is touching the original edges. This is going to help ensure that your drawing or your pattern interlocks. So every module locks together, creating that really seamless repeat pattern design. Okay, I'm fairly happy with that flower that I've added. I'll go and make it permanent in Sharpie later. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is switch. So at first I switched top to bottom. Now I'm going to switch side to side. So laying out my drawing again. You do have tape handy here, so if this is like my paper's kind of curling, if that's getting kind of annoying, no problem. Just take a small piece of blue tape or artist tape so that it will come apart, again, easily, and go ahead and tape it down so that it's just easier for you to work with. So once again, I'm sort of noticing I've got some large obvious negative space here and some large obvious negative space here. So all I'm going to do now is kind of keep filling in flowers, keep filling in design so that it can happily like coexist together. So I think I'll do one more up here. And also at this point, you can absolutely cross quadrants. So you're drawing, in this case, I'm going to take my stem and go ahead and extend it so that it crosses over from quadrant 2 to quadrant 1. Maybe I'll just go ahead and do a kind of a nice leaf here too. Okay. Last time, I'm going to take 2 and 1 and go above 3 and 4. So this is my last time switching. So now I have my 4 quadrants almost back in the original order, and I'm seeing, again, a pretty large negative space right here in the center. So I'm going to go ahead and add a flower. So that feels good to me. I'm going to go ahead and return my drawing to its original order. All right. And I did forget, you will actually need, your X-Acto knife, okay, or a pair of scissors also will work. All right, so I'm back in my original order and we're almost ready to finish up and scan this image in to get a transparency made. But our very last step, the whole entire point of making this interlocking is so when you're printing your repeat pattern, you don't have to do anything that's super anal registration lineup. So repeat pattern is hard enough by itself. You don't necessarily want to spend all this time making sure that this stem lines up with this stem. So if this is your block, you're going to print it again and again. Those flower stems should line up perfectly every single time. But if you're actually waiting for them to line up perfectly, it's going to drive you absolutely crazy and you may not get it perfectly every single time. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut out whatever the smallest part of this flower is, and I'm going to go ahead and tape it onto the other side. So when you burn your screen, the flower is already together and you don't have to worry about that really, really crazy precise registration. So I'm going to go ahead and just with my rotary cutter or your X-Acto knife, I'm going to cut out that bottom of this flower. Now the reason that I cut out the bottom and not the top is just so it fits better onto the screen. I mean, I could have cut out this entire flower and glued it over here, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to make a piece of tape. Take a piece of tape. Go ahead and tape on the back now so that I can make sure that I line it up perfectly. and now the stem of my flower is connected to the head of the flower. So if I look in quadrant 1 now, there doesn't seem to be anything that's cut or split through the middle. Like all of my objects are completely perfectly together. That's true of quadrant 4. And it looks like at the top of quadrant 3, I have this tiny little leaf. And it looks like it went over here. So it's kind of up to me at this point. Since that's such a little piece of information, I'm just going to ignore it. But I am going to take the rest of my tape now and continue to tape up the composition so that it's kind of like back to normal. All 4 quadrants in the right order. Now the very last thing that I'll do is I'll take my Sharpie and I'll go ahead and finish off the rest of the drawing that's still in pencil now. So at this point, I'm going to probably add more detail. I'm going to go in with a thicker Sharpie, make sure that I have some line quality variations, make sure that I have all the detail that I want for my drawing, and then that is ready to turn into a transparency. Thanks so much, and I can't wait to see your repeat patterns.